Live-action adaptations of video games are generally regarded as not being very good, with them often missing the mark by completely changing elements of the game, or by having the creators of the show openly state how they haven't played the games, or even looked at them. But every now and then, an adaptation is able to do the game justice. The Last of Us TV show was one of those cases. It was a big budget TV show that respected its source material and was genuinely able to capture the essence of the original game. The acting was very strong, the direction was good, the spectacle of certain moments goes unmatched by other shows, and the clickers, when they were actually on screen, were as equally terrifying as they were in the game. However, despite all these elements, and the show genuinely being good, I still preferred the original video game. Now why is that? Well, first there's the fact that I experienced the game before the TV series. No matter how good or bad the show ended up being, there was nothing it could do to change the fact that I would always be comparing it against the incredible video game that preceded it. And considering certain scenes are almost one-to-one with the video game, it doesn't help that my mind would always automatically remind me of that scene from the video game. And in every case, I always preferred how the scene was acted out and how the lines were delivered in the video game. However, that's not the reason why I enjoyed the game more than the show, because in fairness to the show, the reason I just gave is arguably a moot point. Because anyone who watches the show first and then goes to the game will likely have the reverse experience and prefer how the lines were delivered in the TV show. Now, the main reason why I like the game more is down to focus. And before I explain that point, I do want to just give a spoiler warning for the original game, the TV series, and The Last of Us Part 2 game. With that out of the way, let's talk about The Last of Us. One of the benefits of the TV series is that it was going to make additions to the original story. They were going to expand on what came before and give us more insight into the story and world of The Last of Us. And to accomplish that, they decided to show us the lives and stories of some of the secondary characters. And truthfully, I genuinely like this stuff. Not everyone was a fan of the Bill and Frank episode for multiple reasons, some of them very fair and others less so, but for me I found it to be a very nice self-contained episode. It was very well acted and it was emotional too, and it landed with me. I also really liked the episode that focused on Henry and Sam. In fact, it was my favourite episode of the season. However, by doing this, the show was shifting focus away from Joel and Ellie. The reason why The Last of Us game works so well is because we are completely in control of Joel for the entire game. Well, most of the game. And the section we aren't in control of him, we instead play as Ellie. This means that we see the world through these characters' eyes, and it means that we form a very strong connection with both of them. It's the reason why a lot of video game protagonists are so beloved, because you play as them and therefore the focus of the game is squarely on them, because the world and story literally revolves around that character. Throughout the entirety of the Last of Us video game, we as a player are either with Joel or Ellie. In the show, we spend massive amounts of time away from these characters, especially the episode with Bill and Frank. The problem that results from that is the relationship between Joel and Ellie feels slightly more diluted and less important. It doesn't help that these extra elements in the story end up feeling more like distractions than integral elements. Good distractions, but distractions nonetheless. There is a phrase in filmmaking that is brought up every now and then called "kill your darlings." What this means is that you must eliminate any part of your film, series or game, whether that be the characters, scenes, sentences, side plots, etc., that no matter how much you love them, if they don't serve your story, then you must remove them. What is the story of The Last of Us, both the show and the game? The Last of Us is about two people travelling across the country in the hopes of curing the zombie apocalypse. The love story between Bill and Frank may have been very good, but it wasn't essential to The Last of Us. If we're being generous, the episode was basically a very good filler episode, because for the most part you could skip it and you wouldn't miss out on much for the wider Last of Us story. In fact, the love story between Bill and Frank was so unimportant that it was literally never shown in the previously on The Last of Us segments at the start of each episode. Very clearly, The Last of Us TV show was not killing its darlings. On the other hand, every part of the game was essential because it built up either Joel or Ellie's character and showed the transition in their relationship. It clearly had more focus than the show. It is harder for us to get invested in the Joel and Ellie from the show because we're taking constant detours that even last entire episodes. It also doesn't help that due to the shift away from these characters, some people will end up even more invested in other relationships, like Bill and Frank's or Sam and Henry's. The reason The Last of Us game worked so well was not because of its story, which in reality is actually very simple. It's two people going from point A to point B. In fact, it's basically a road trip in the zombie apocalypse. No, the reason The Last of Us works so well is because of its characters. Primarily, it's central too. It's also the reason why so many people bounced off The Last of Us Part 2, because the first game was very character driven, whilst the second game was a lot more story driven and focused on its narrative and the messages it wanted to convey. Not every player could understandably make that jump between the first game and its sequel. But regardless, The Last of Us worked so well because of Joel and Ellie. Both are as iconic as the fungus that terrorizes them in the game. Their growing relationship and the deeper dives into their character works so much better without the constant interruptions in the TV show. And it also helps that the Left Behind DLC is played after the first game and doesn't interject into a very important part of the story like it does in the show. At that part of the game, we don't know if Joel is dead or alive, and it's genuinely very worrying for the player because we all love Joel. He's the character we've played up to that point, and like any video game protagonist, we've connected with him. A character would have to be very terrible or annoying for gamers to not like playing as them. Gamers will literally fall in love with and form strong connections with protagonists who don't even speak. So for us to switch to controlling Ellie is a big deal and really makes the player anxious about Joel's well-being. In the show it's a little harder to care because they show Joel is fine almost right away. While fine might not be the right term, but they show he's alive and then we cut to all the Left Behind stuff. Again, it just feels like filler. Good filler that expands the world, but it's not necessary to the story and is another distraction. And you'll go from being concerned about Joel to just wanting the Left Behind stuff to hurry up and end. The Last of Us TV show is really good and one of the best live action adaptations of a video game ever, but due to it lacking the focus of the video game, I personally found it to be the weaker of the two versions of the Last of Us story. That said, I'm actually really interested to see how this approach affects the second season. I'll admit I wasn't a fan of The Last of Us Part 2. It was very clear that the story had undergone multiple rewrites and that they'd moved the scenes in the story around a lot, and clearly weren't sure how to structure the story. I think the approach they've taken with the TV show could end up resulting in the story from the second game being told in a better way. The Last of Us Part 2 was, as I said, very story driven and focused on multiple characters and had multiple characters' viewpoints. I genuinely think the series has the potential to convey what Neil Druckmann wanted to do with the second game in a much better way, because the first season had multiple character perspectives and focused on more than just our leads, so the second season will surely do the same. It feels like a more natural fit to me than what the game did by just showing us Ellie and Abby's perspectives. But then again, I still think it will be inevitably divisive, because even though I think the game did the story better, The Last of Us show was still good, and there are plenty of people who only have a connection with the show versions of the characters, and plenty of them will not like the direction the story takes, just like the players, because they love these characters. But plenty of them will likely also love that direction too, so we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, that's why I like the game more. But what about you? Did you feel the same way as me? Do you think my reason makes sense? Or do you disagree? Did you prefer the game or the show? Have you even played the game? And have you even seen the show? Also, what do you think of The Last of Us Part 2? And are you excited, or at the very least interested, to see how it will be adapted in Season 2 of the TV show? Let me know your answers to all those questions as well as your general thoughts on both the show and the game down in the comments below. And do be sure to hit the like button whilst you're down there. It significantly boosts this video in the YouTube algorithm. And if you're feeling especially generous, then do consider subscribing too, please. I'm hoping to hit 1000 subscribers before the end of the year, and it's looking very doable. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.